What's up, martial arts fanatics? Welcome back. As always, I am Coach Greg, and today we're doing a system breakdown by your vote of Arman Tsarukyan, who's a great case study. I'm excited to be breaking him down, especially after his most recent win over Charles Oliveira, which has made him the #1 contender in the lightweight division and setting him up for a likely rematch against Islam Makhachev. This is a great case study because of his amazing ability to blend his takedowns and his striking into one cohesive system. So I'm very excited to be able to present this material. So that being said, stay tuned and let's get right into it. Okay, so when he strikes, his primary goal, I want you to keep in mind, is always to establish a threat that allows him to set up his takedown. One of the things that's great if you are a good wrestler is the ability to turn fights into a wrestling match, because one, you can grind them out, be in a top position and dominate against somebody who's maybe not as skilled. And two, you're gonna take a lot less damage. And that's the nice thing about having a wrestling-based style, is you tend to have longer MMA careers because you take a lot less damage. Now, what he does a lot is he fights a lot. He always fights orthodox, and he does a lot of this bounce style, almost like point style footwork. A lot of level changing, feinting, and lead hand threatening. A lot of this circling kind of motion to threaten hooks as he starts coming into range, getting his jab. He likes to double up on the jab a lot, which I really like that. Right, getting in here, doing this kind of stuff. Bouncing out, getting in, getting a shot, and getting back out. He fights predominantly from an outside range because it's safer. When he closes the gap, it's wrestling time. But from the outside, he's gonna pick them apart, and that's his goal. He puts a lot of work behind the jab, not only to establish range, but to create a threat to set up his other striking, and more importantly, to start landing shots on him, getting on the outside with kind of non-committed attacks where he's not as much danger, because a jab is one of the safer punches to throw. He throws this to set up and establish more dangerous striking, and more importantly, to set him up for the takedown, like I said. Now, he'll use this when he fights against orthodox fighters. What you'll notice a lot of times is that when he throws the 1-2, he tends to step into the 1-2 and close his hip forward a little bit. One, because it gives him more of that threat of the takedown, because he'll use the cross to set up his takedown. We'll talk about that later, right? But he comes forward the hip a lot. And what this allows him to do is close the distance on his cross. And in the case of Beneil Dariush, what it actually does is it closes it to a point where he can get to a tie clinch because he closes up so much. This is a phenomenal skill, to be way on the outside with the jab and then closing in very tight on the cross. Like I said, later on, you're gonna see him use this to set up his takedown and the double leg. He'll also throw a lot of lead leg roundhouse kicks. He'll throw them as one-offs from the outside, he gets them working about the jab game, thinking about this, and then throws, especially likes to do a lot of head kicks on this. Why? It's hard to catch a head kick. It's much harder to defend. It's much harder to catch it, and it's less commitment from him with a lead side roundhouse kick. So he does a lot of these skip roundhouse kicks from the outside to mix up his attacks from this outside range. He'll start to put this into combinations as well, where he starts to throw a 1-2. And then what you'll notice is, remember we talked about closing up on this cross to set up the takedown? He'll do that, or he'll step forward so it ends up like a switch kick, right? The switch kick, we come here, so we throw a more powerful left kick. And he does something similar. He throws the cross, steps, pop. So you'll see this a lot on that 1-2 to the high roundhouse kick is a combination he likes a lot. He'll also start throwing things like he'll start throwing a leg kick to a jab every once in a while, stuff like that. And he will level change with his left leg kick, but not as often as he does when he goes to the right leg kick, which we'll talk about in a little while. Some combinations he likes to throw are usually some version of basic boxing combinations. He likes to double up on the jab a lot and do like a 1-1-2 or a 1-2 to the lead side kick like we just talked about. So it's a lot of pop, 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 right? Pop, pop, come in here. A lot of that type of stuff tends to be some version of that. Occasionally he'll mix this up with like a 1-2-3, right? Basic boxing combination. You will also see him sometimes throwing the jab, coming in here with a rear uppercut. He doesn't have a ton of success with this, but he does throw it every once in a while. He does throw in some other kicks as well that I want to mention. The first is the turning back kick. He has landed it before, but he's not super successful with the turning back kick. He throws it too far out. In my opinion, turning kicks, you either want to catch them as they're moving in or you want to get them so that they have nowhere to go. Very similar. I treat turning kicks the same way that I treat when you're shooting a takedown. The only exception is that you can also catch people if they're running away from your power hand. You can catch the turning back kick. And there are definitely some guys who are very good at that. We talked about that in the Shavkat Rakhmonov. However, he doesn't establish a lot of rear hand threat. He's a lead hand striker. So he runs into this where he's throwing from the outside a lot, and he throws the turning back kick. And yeah, he might touch him, but he's not really doing damage with it most of the time. I think that the only exception was he caught Gamrot with it once. And he has landed a couple times, but he's not super successful with it. Not in the way that you see out of guys like Edson Barboza or Valentina Shevchenko. And that's because they're doing it from a close range here. Right? As they're moving in, they're throwing that turning back kick. He's not doing that. He's far to the outside, and he throws it, and often they back up. Now, that is a win in its own, though. This is where I get to my next one with the axe kick. I'm not a big fan of the axe kick from a damage perspective. I am a fan of the axe kick from a setting up techniques perspective. And one of the things that you'll see him do a lot is back guys up with his kicking. So he'll use the axe kick. He did land it on Oliveira because he has amazing flexibility. So he can do more with it than most, right? He's got like Andy Hug flexibility on his axe kick. And that also serves him in takedown defense. And as he comes up, you know, he does land it, but it's not super damaging. What it does though, is it moves them back to the cage. So he's working the jab, backing him up from the outside. And then look how close it puts him as it backs him up to the cage. And this is what he did to Oliveira very well, okay? Sometimes he gets guys who like to switch to a southpaw. See, this gets Islam Makhachev and Mateusz Gamrot. A lot of wrestlers like to just switch to the southpaw. When they do that, you see a lot of rear leg kicking out of them. Especially a lot of the high section, rear leg roundhouse kick. And so you're throwing the jab, and he puts up the rear leg roundhouse kick. He'll start to do damage with that. And the nice thing about it is that, to be honest, a lot of MMA fighters are not the best at defending this kick. They tend to do this and treat it like defending a hook. The problem is, if you've ever felt a roundhouse kick through a high guard like this, you know it still rattles you. And you can drive through that and still concuss somebody. He doesn't go that hard, but you can really damage somebody through this. It definitely rattles him. And so he'll start to put that on, especially from outside range. But what I like that he does is he starts switching it up. And in the Mateusz Gamrot fight, I'm gonna reference that fight a lot, by the way, because it's kind of like showcases really what he does a lot. When he throws the rear leg roundhouse kick to the body, he does damage. I actually wish in the Gamrot fight he threw it more in the later rounds and stopped trying to go for the wrestling, which was not working in the later rounds as he got tired. But attacking that body with the roundhouse kick after setting it up, that level change roundhouse kick is gold. And you'll start to see things like we talked about, like, you know, leg kick jab from the orthodox. He does kind of the same thing in reverse, where he'll come with the jab and throw the rear leg roundhouse kick. And in the Gamrot fight, he trips him and does a calf kick that drops him to the ground. This level change roundhouse kick works very well for him. Very similar to what you see out of Islam Makhachev from southpaw, where he throws in here and he throws the rear leg roundhouse kick and across to start setting up his techniques. The difference is that Arman Tsarukyan just happens to do it from open stance when he's in orthodox as his opponent switches to southpaw. So from here, the next thing I want to mention is when he gets tired, he changes tactics a little bit. He stops being as bouncy on the outside, throwing a jab and getting out, right? Right, he starts setting up his takedown. He starts to slow down his footwork and throw long combinations instead. This is where you see things like a 1-1-2-3, like pop, 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 right? You'll start seeing a lot of that stuff out of him. Or a 1-2, back to that left kick, right? A lot of this kind of stuff starts coming out of him. But he tends to prefer a lot of doubling up on the jab, some sort of a right hand punch, followed by usually a hook. He will sometimes do like a 1-1-2-1 to like a rotating jab, where it rotates back into it. But you start seeing him bite down on a little bit longer combinations as he gets tired. Now, for counters, what you'll mostly see out of him for counters is predominantly the lead side hook. Remember, he's an outside fighter, throwing this, threatening it in here. As they come forward, he'll just keep putting hooks on him as he starts backing away, landing hooks over and over again. Every once in a while he throws a counter cross, but mostly he'll repeatedly go to that counter hook. Now, he will also shoot as a countermeasure. We'll talk about that in takedowns, but it's just a reactive shot. As he starts throwing it here, if he continues to get backed up, he shoots underneath as he gets pressured. The final thing I want to mention in counters, and this goes back to when he's tired, he starts to spin out a lot more. Now, this is not a bad thing because he lands it. Unfortunately, we haven't seen this a lot because he's only had 2 fights that you see him get tired in, and that is in the Islam Makhachev fight and in the Mateusz Gamrot fight. Islam Makhachev, by the 3rd round, he kept going for takedowns that weren't happening, and he just burned himself out. And Mateusz Gamrot, rounds 4 and 5, he starts to get tired from this constant wrestling pace. To be fair, that is a hard pace that he keeps. So what happens is, as he starts getting here, he starts throwing these combinations, and he throws the roundhouse kick, and then he starts to do things like spin into the spinning bottom fist at the end of it. You start seeing a lot more of that type of a spinning bottom fist and spinning elbow when he gets tired because he's in the pocket. And as you start to press him, he's getting backed up, but he can't get low enough to get the shot. So what does he do? He spins. This is a great tactic for him when you start to get turned away. There's nothing wrong with this. This is something I always like to recommend. You have to have solutions for if you start to get backed away. Now, I like to do what he usually likes to do, which is from here, come underneath and shoot, right? Because normally he's in here throwing the hook. If he gets backed up and he starts rotating away, comes underneath the shoot. Great tactic. But when he gets tired, that's not always plausible, so he switches. And that's a great technique when somebody's putting a lot of pressure on you. When he shoots, what I like about what Arman does is it's the same approach every time, and he just has a game plan, right? We talk about this in other system breakdowns. You know, Bo Nickel talks about it. I just watched his video where it's great, by the way, if you haven't seen it, him doing a seminar at Jocko's, where he talks about, you know, getting in here, getting to the collar tie, and using that to set up the same couple takedowns. And if they do this, you do this. If they do this, you do this. Great stuff. Arman does something very similar. From the outside, right? If he's throwing a proactive shot, he's going to throw the cross a lot of times to set it up. And then usually what he's looking to do is he'll try to drop his right knee. If he needs to, he'll bring his other knee down as well. And then he can kind of pick which side he wants to come up to. Same thing if he's doing it from a reactive, right? He's throwing his hook, he rotates in. Doesn't matter which leg goes between. And a lot of times he will go for both with the idea of coming up with either side and driving them back. Okay? So just getting underneath him is his primary goal, right? Get a hold of the legs. Now from here, his first attempt is just to try to drive them back and knock them straight back. But he knows that doesn't happen a lot of times, especially at this high level. So what does he do? Is he starts to come up and pick them up. And he'll just try to lift them up and dump them. But even that doesn't happen a lot of times. So what he usually really gets is one of 2 things. Either he gets to a back control or he gets to a single leg. As he comes underneath, he throws down here, right? Maybe gets the other knee down underneath him if he needs it, comes up. Now from here, he starts migrating up the hips and climbing up the body. If he can, he'll poke his head behind the back shoulder and start to come through like a duck under. If they stay facing him, he comes up to a high single, right? He starts picking up this leg, and what you'll see him start going for a lot is trips, right? Or like so. That's why I had problems with Islam Makhachev. Islam's too slick for that, right? If you know, when he was trying to shoot on Islam, he'd come underneath, Islam defends, he'd come up with the high single, Islam bounces, and then he kicks his foot through and he loses it, right? It's just, Islam is just too slick for that. You have to have better, I just don't think that's the right approach to him. But he does get Islam down when he gets to the back. And that's, I think, where he really shines, but what he's always looking to get to is get to a back control, right? So he'll come in here, boom, shoot in, come through, get to a body clinch, pop out the back. This is what he loves to get to. Now from here, he has a couple of options. One is a lot of times guys will back up to the cage, so he'll bump the hips forward and then mat return them, right? Or he bumps the hip forward and steps back with him and mat returns him. This is something, he does something very similar. We'll talk about that. I guess I'll talk about it now, is that when he has a back control, one of his solutions from the bottom, and he does this from standing up too, is if he has a back, as guys start to turn to face him, he'll drop to his knees here and bring them back down. And the reason he does that is usually it happens on the way up. He's got a back control here, and guys start coming up, and instead of following them up to try to keep a tight position, he has them on their hips here in like a turtle position. And as they start coming up, he just controls here, and then he just turns back into them. That's all he does. He does the same thing from here. If he gets to here, he can very easily start to turn back into him. Now, if he feels like they're turning back into him and he's gonna lose the position, he comes back up to the high single. Now, what I would like to see him start to add in, because I think the trips is sometimes a difficulty for him. He does hit it, but I think that he could have better success. You know, we talked about in the Daniel Cormier breakdown, one of the things he does is when he starts getting on the single leg, is the idea of making him hop back and forth sideways, coming into the high crotch and lifting him up. I think that technique would work really well. I also think adding in running the pipe from here. So as he has this here, stepping back on it and running the pipe, I think he'd have good success with that. I just don't see him do it very often because, like I said, he has a game plan. He likes to go the same thing over and over again. So he shoots in, he comes up, goes for the body, goes for the back control. They turn to face him. He goes for the single leg. They go to turn away. If he can get the head behind the shoulder, he gets to a back control. From here, he just gets their hips forward and starts bringing them down. Over and over and over, he does the same thing. And that's what I like about it, is it's a repeatable process that he just takes into account common responses. But he loves to just hang out on his back, right? He'll just take guys down from there consistently. That's how he got Islam Makhachev down. That's why he was the first guy in the UFC to take Islam down, because he had this system. Went down, came up, managed to get to a back, brings him down. Once he takes him down, they're gonna go in one of only a couple places. Either one, he's taking him down using a single or a double, and he ends up here. Or two, he ends up on the back because he took him down from a back control. If he ends up on the legs, all he cares about is controlling the hips, right? They're gonna start to try to back up against the wall like so. All he's gonna do is come under here and control the hips. His left leg will shoot underneath to start to shelf these legs, and his right foot starts to step over. And he'll hang out here. He can throw shots, but all he cares about is keeping these hips and legs under his control. And then from here, he triangles the legs. And as they continue to post up on this hand, what does he do? He migrates his head to the left, and he starts looking to get a back control. So as they're up here thinking about getting back to their feet, he's getting his head behind them to start to turn them over and get back to his back control. So once again, from stand-up, his goal is to shoot the double leg, try to come up to the body, because most of the time, he knows how people are gonna defend. He's gonna have a hard time defending the double leg, or continuing with the double leg straight back. So a lot of guys, he'll be able to climb the hips, and then from there, he's trying to get to a back control. On the bottom, he takes him down, he tries to get to a back control. I love it. Back control is a great place to be. Now from here, he tends to be, and I've seen this out of a lot of wrestlers, who tend to sit back on the hips more, rather than the traditional jiu-jitsu tending to be on the side more. He tends to sit back here, and his first goal is to try to get his hooks in, right? And start trying to get inside of here. But a lot of times, that's not always possible. And he knows that they're gonna respond in one of three different ways. They're either gonna try to roll through, they're gonna try to roll away, like a Peterson, or just roll into their back to get to a better position where they can fight out of it from like a half guard or something like that, or they're gonna try to stand up. And he has solutions for any of them. The first one, let's talk about, like, they can't really Peterson because he tends to sit more back, right? So they're not gonna really be able to pull him over. If he's more on the side, the Peterson is more possible. But when he's sitting back here, it's not really possible. So what tends to happen is they tend to roll this way, and what he'll do is just continue him over, and instead of going to mount, he goes to a quarter mount. Why? It's more controlling. And two, and this is what I think he's really after, if he can continue to turn them, now when he gets behind them, he's got hooks. Now, he doesn't ever roll back the way I just did. I did that to kind of illustrate my point, only because it's a bob, but he always stays on top. This is an important part of his game. He never gets too caught up in a positional control. He's never like, I'm in a back control, I'm gonna fall back and attack from back, right? That's never where he's at. He goes, I'm in a back control. I'm gonna stay in a top position as they roll away and just continue to stay on top, right? No matter what they do, I'm gonna stay on top. Half guard, close guard, doesn't matter. I'm just gonna stay on top. If they start to turn back away, oh, he's happy to go back to the back. But he never gets like so fixated on like getting to a mount that he risks getting rolled. He's always just kind of surfing wherever they're at so that now he can just follow them. And this is what he does when he goes to the 3/4 mount, is he gets in here and he doesn't pull them back. He lets them go back to their base, and now he's got a hook in. You start threatening, flattening them out. The other ways that they can move is if they start to stand up. And we talked about that. He has a solution for that. As they start to stand up here, he just stays on his knees. He doesn't follow him. He just turns and brings him back down. If they try to roll away and roll through it, he'll be in here, and all he does is kind of hang on. As they start to roll through, he rolls through with them and just turns into them. He just doesn't let go of the body. That's pretty much what you'll see him do from back. He throws some punches, but mostly he just rides the wave. He just surfs on top because he wrestles more than he strikes in there. I would like to see a little bit more damage from these positions, from the top positions, and being more threatening from the top. If he could put in more of a solid submission threat from all of these positions, I think he'd be more dangerous. As it is, he's content to just ride and win on points and out wrestle him. But I think if he started adding in more types of legitimate threats, like getting to a back control and doing more than just holding the position, right? I would like to see him do more damage as he starts to get in here and really put a hurting on these guys. And that's the one thing I haven't really seen out of him. When he wrestles, he doesn't he should be destroying these guys on the ground because he can control them very well. But he's so busy having a wrestling match that he forgets it's a fight sometimes. I'd like to see him finish a little bit more. Now, where he does do really well, honestly, where I think he does more damage is in the closed guard. You see this against Charles Oliveira. In the closed guard, he's in here, and all he does is keep a lot of forward head pressure and start putting elbows on him. Right? He'll throw punches, keep this position, forward head pressure, throw some body shots coming up till he can start landing elbows. And those elbows do damage. That's where he does real damage on the ground, which is surprising because he's much better at getting to these dominant positions, but the closed guard is where he does more damage. He does okay in elbow, in half guard as well. What I like that he does is it's very similar to what you see out of Beneil Dariush, how he does half guard, how we talked about in that breakdown. Just focusing on flattening him out, getting the head underneath, threatening it here, passing it over, getting to a back control as they turn away, right? It's the idea of pass and strike, threaten submission, get to a back. When he's on bottom, we don't have a ton of work of him on bottom. Most of the time, like I said, if they're on his back, he reaches over to try to get clear, and he'll give up his back, go to his base, give up his back, and start reaching over to get his underhook in and start getting underneath and disconnecting. It works well for him, so why change it? From a closed guard, what we do see that's interesting, and I think if I remember correctly, this is one of the earlier cases of seeing octopus guard in MMA. Against Islam, he starts off going for the Kimura. And this I like. We talked about this before. The thing that's nice about the Kimura is I can't get hit from here. He can't really do any real damage. And he starts to sit up. I would have liked to have seen him go further and push that hand to the ground and start coming out this way. But he doesn't do that. That's okay. He comes here, he starts threatening guillotines. And what ends up happening is he goes, okay, gives up the side control and starts to come up to an octopus guard here. Now, he doesn't do like a hip bump sweep or anything like that. I believe in his case, he starts to sit out like he's gonna go for the back take, and he ends up coming through and ends up in a scramble where he goes for a single leg. But it is a clear use of it, and it kind of makes sense based on his game. It's better for him to get to his side control than be stuck in a guard that he can't get out of and he's taking damage. Because from a side control, he'll try to wrestle up, right? He'll go to his base and try to wrestle up. And in this case, like I said, we don't have a lot of footage of this. We have it against Islam. he starts to get flattened out, and he starts to come up to his side here, right? And he starts being one of the earlier cases that we've seen of octopus guard in MMA. And like I said, I believe if I remember correctly, what he does from here is he manages to kind of sit out a little bit and start to go to attack a leg, rather than some of the octopus guard stuff that we're starting to see with like hip bump sweeps and stuff like that. But who knows, with the development of octopus guard these days, we might see in a future fight, if he has a championship fight against Islam, him ending up in that position. So it'd be interesting to see what he does. All right, on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I like his systematic approach, like I said. The overall system is a consistent game plan. Outside striking to keep himself safe, to set up his takedown. Mix up some stuff from the outside with some kicks and stuff like that. Get to his proactive shot. From the shot, he goes low, comes up, goes for the body. If they turn into him, he does a single leg. If they turn away from him, he does the back. Takes him down to the ground. From there, he knows a couple predictable attacks. Stays on top of them, just surfs the wave, throws a couple punches. Eventually they get back to their feet and he rinses and repeats just over and over, just grinding guys. And it takes really special wrestlers to be able to beat that. That's why he is going to struggle with the even higher level wrestlers than he is. He's very good, but there are some guys, Mateusz Gamrot and Islam Makhachev, which I keep going back to. Those are the guys he struggled with, but he also gave the best fights of his career because they were exciting, because there's high level wrestling and scrambles over and over and over again. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you, and I hope you share with your friends.